Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, November 22nd, 1972, interviewing Miss Mildred Hipskind at her home. I think we'll start the interview now with Miss Mildred Hipskind. I'm going to ask her first where and when she was born and her mother's maiden name and her father's full name. Just talk right in the microphone.
I was born in the very house in which I live on October the 21st, 1903. My father's name was Joseph. My mother's maiden name was Weck, Elizabeth Margaret Weck.
Where did you go to school?
I went to the Old Century up on Manchester Avenue, to Wabash High School, and do you want my...
Yes, go ahead.
And to the University of Chicago, where I got my PhD degree. I went to the University of Wyoming on a fellowship in American Studies. I attended summer school at the University of Colorado. I got my master's degree from the American University in Washington, D.C., and I also have study credits from, travel credits from the State College of San Francisco, from Indiana University. That just about takes care of
your educational career. Going back to your birthplace and your home, do you have some of the recollections or reminiscences of your parents and how they lived in those days, and what mother cooked, and what your dad did, and
sure.
Your playmates, and possibly some
Yeah.
teachers that had some influences? And let's
Certainly.
let those roll on.
All right. My father was a carpenter, and I often think about the many hours he spent working from early in the morning till late at night, 6 days a week. I remember very well how it was to be the youngest of a family of 9, with 6 brothers who were, some of them quite interested in teasing me more than anything else, but always very good to me. I remember very well how we always had company. Of course, there were so many of us around the table, and just having one more person made no difference whatever. And some of the people who have been pretty well known in town, like George Martin, my first cousin, used to step in just at any time, and he would be invited to eat with us. We had to cook the kind of food that would go a long way. And every Tuesday, we had baked beans. I'll never forget. And, well, it was just, my mother baked twice a week and always had pie and cake and cookies on hand. That's one reason I think I'm so fond of sweets. But we had really a very, very nice family life. But there was such a difference between the ages of my oldest brother and sister, who were twins, and me, 20 years, that, our interests were quite different. And I'm the only one that went on through college.
Who were some of your neighbors and playmates back in the childhood?
Well, our closest neighbors, that is those in whom we were most interested, were the Weck children across the street. My mother's brother, Martin Weck, and his family lived across the street. And they had 2 daughters, Marie and Ruth. Marie was 1 year older, and Ruth was 3 years younger. They were my very closest friends. But the neighborhood has changed so much. And I do remember a girl by the name of Everhart that lived next door. But very few of the families that lived here when I was younger still live here. But we lived our home is in, or my home still is in, this German section of town. And we were very much interested in our German community, and we inherited a great many of our interests, I think, and the kind of food we ate, and our interests from a German background. We attended what was then called the German Evangelical Church, and is now the St. Matthew's United Church of Christ, having changed names twice since then.
Was Spring Street paved back in those days?
Spring Street was not paved, and we had deep gutters, and whenever it rained, of course, the kids liked to get out to go wading. I never liked to do that very much. I was always a little cranky about getting my feet dirty. so I didn't like to do that.
Obviously, there was no inside plumbing either.
Oh, no, I should say not. No inside plumbing, I should say not.
Well, did many of the people still keep horses?
Yes, we always had horses. My father had 2 horses. One was Fanny and one was Blanche. And the nicest recollections I have had to do with trips to Urbana, 7 whole miles away. And we always went in our carriage with the plush seats and the fringe around the top, out to my grandfather's house out in Urbana.
Since this is the day before Thanksgiving, do you recall what Thanksgiving was like at the Hipskind house with 9 children and Mom and Dad?
Yes, I should say. By the time I was old enough really to appreciate what Thanksgiving was all about, some of the family had married and were not living here any longer, but they all came home for Thanksgiving. And it was my mother who did all the cooking, and of course she had help, but she and my father provided the food, and we enjoyed ourselves together very much.
Good. Why did you go to college and no one else in the family did?
My Uncle Fred was an instructor in Chicago. He was the head of the junior college at what was called then the Chicago Normal School. And he was very much interested in having some of us come to school up there. And I was very fortunate in winning a scholarship when I graduated from high school. So I attended the University of Chicago and lived with my uncle and his family up there.
Did any particular teacher in the school system here at Wabash have any influence? Or possibly as a young lady you'd say, I would like to be like her or him as a teacher?
Oh, there were so many. I loved all my teachers because I liked school so much. I particularly remember Vida Ross, who was an aunt of James Ebbinghaus. I remember Fanny McCarty and Margaret Plummer, the present Al Plummer's great aunt. I remember very well Miss Ruth Jones, Stella Moore, Bess Bear, Miss Blaney, and a great many other very fine teachers who influenced me a great deal.
When you went off to Chicago, you had a scholarship and obviously had room and board with this uncle. What was it for a young lady who taking off for the big city of Chicago, and what was your life like in Chicago?
Well, in the first place, my brother took me up on the train. In those days, you could go by train very easily. My brother took me up, my brother Otto, who was postmaster in Urbana. We used to enjoy that little train trip every once in a while. But anyway, I went to, when I went, I think I was about the greenest young lady that ever entered the University of Chicago. And having come from a school where there were not very many students, to enter the University of Chicago, where so many of my classmates had been educated at the University High School and were so much more sophisticated, I wonder sometimes how I got through it all. And I really didn't have very much college life for the first couple of years because I was spending a great deal of my time not only studying hard, but going 3 miles from campus every morning and every evening, to campus and from campus every evening, so that it was really not easy for me. Then I helped at my uncle's home too. That was where I helped earn my board and room, but they charged me nothing for my staying there. That's one reason I could do it.
Good. Well, when you graduated from the university, then what did you do?
The first thing I did was to want to come home. My aunt, who also was a teacher in Chicago, tried to persuade me to apply for a position in Chicago. She kept saying, oh, wonderful, wonderful Chicago, there is no place like it. And I said, oh, I'm a small town girl, I want to go right back home. So that's what I did. And I applied for a job through an agency or through a regular Indiana service. And I had a chance to go to a villa, Indiana. But Mr. Darnell, who was then principal of the high school, suggested that I just wait a while. He thought there would be a vacancy here. So I didn't get a position early in the fall. instead. I worked at Shear's Grocery for $2 a week and saved my money. And then in October, at the end of the Teachers Association meetings, Mr. Darnell called me in and wanted to know if I would take a substitute's job more or less permanently, because Miss Catherine Troxell was having surgery and he didn't expect her back very soon. So while I was an English major, I took a job teaching 3 or 4 classes in history, and that seemed to determine the course of my life too. Even though I taught English a great deal, I continued history more thoroughly.
Where was Shear's Grocery?
Where it is now. And Carl and Lawrence were the proprietors then.
That was long before Larry was born, that's running the store now.
Yes. Larry I had in school, and it was Lawrence and Carl were the ones who owned the store.
Did the Shears, were they relatives?
No, the Shears are not relatives, but our families were very, very friendly, very closely associated. Our fathers both sang in the choir, Jake Shear and my father, and they were our families. There was they had a very large family too, and there was usually someone in their family the age of someone in our family, and there have been 3 marriages that made our family seem related, but we really are not.
Lawrence and Carl Shear, just knowing Lawrence at the end of his life, and of course Carl's still living, always had very eccentric work habits. Were they eccentric habits back in those days?
Carl, I think, more so than Lawrence. I think he was just, he followed a regular pattern more than Carl does. He works when late at night when others wouldn't, and he works on Sunday when others wouldn't, but yes, they've had unusual work hours.
Well, you took over Miss Troxell's classes then at the high school, and the principal was, who was on the faculty at the high school, the principal and so forth?
Well, I had some of my former teachers as co-workers. Ruth Jones, I was in her first English class in high school, and she was still on the faculty for many years after I started teaching. Miss Blaney was still there, Miss Moore was still there, Bess Bear, from whom I had all my mathematics courses, was a co-worker and didn't retire until 1940. And I remember very well Mr. Darnell's leaving and Mr. Carpenter's taking over after Mr. Darnell had left the principalship. There were, let's see, Claire Miller, who's still living up in her home in Nagoni, Michigan, was also on the faculty both when I went to school and when I started teaching. And Mr. Magner was my first teacher. I had him as a junior in physics and a senior in chemistry, and he continued to teach 2 or 3 years after I was on the faculty, before he retired to go to Honeywell. Mr. Barnhart, whom I respected so highly, also was a former, I didn't have him, he was a commercial teacher, but he was a very wonderful person to work with on the faculty. Mr. Tewksbury, who is still living, incidentally, and he lives in Lafayette, but he had been my sophomore and junior English teacher, and he had just come home from the service, just as Mr. Magner had when I had them in high school, and then I worked with them for a good many years. So we really were all good. We had good, close relationships, and I appreciated them all so much.
What was your first year of teaching? What year would that have been?
My first year of teaching, actually, with the contract, I date to 1926. See, I graduated in 1925 from the University of Chicago, and then taught as a substitute beginning in the fall of 1925, and I certainly wasn't very much older than Nancy Cowell and Armand Baylor and some of the people that are so well known around Wabash, as I had them in class. But I always say I started teaching in 1926 when I started with the new high school, in room 206 in the Wabash High School, and that's where I stayed for 41 years.
What was your beginning salary on that first contract?
I can't remember exactly, and it seems strange that I wouldn't, but I do remember that the first check I deposited was for $139, and I suppose that was for a month, and some of the older teachers who started with $40 a month thought that I was getting a pretty princely salary.
Was that a lot of money then?
Well, to me that was a lot of money. I'll never forget, I was able to go downtown to buy a pair of shoes that cost $7, and I thought, well, that's really spending the money.
How did you get back and forth to school the first year or so?
Teaching,
Yes.
I mean. I walked, and even after I got a car in 1930, I bought my first car, and I kept it in the garage and walked back and forth. I enjoyed walking very much, and people very often would stop to ask me to ride, but I preferred walking. But, of course, later on I had so many other responsibilities that I got in the habit of walking too, or driving my car too, yeah.
We're going to jump ahead and then jump back, and one question. The school today, and you saw it in 1926 as a brand new building. What's your impression?
I tell you, when that building was opened to the public in 1926, when I first started teaching there, I thought there couldn't be any nicer place in the world to teach. Everything was so, so brand new, and classrooms seemed very large, and it was a very wonderful place to be. And now, of course, they have carpeting on the floor, they have so many things they didn't have then, but I thought it was a great school.
What's your impression of the building today?
Well, today I think it's a very fine structure from the standpoint of architecture and the modern things that they've introduced, modern teaching methods, and very nice facilities and all that. But I don't know, I have an attachment for the old school, you know, it's just like your old home, especially for room 206 where I taught 41 years.
Do you believe in this modern philosophy of building a new school, as the architects are propounding this theory, that you push them over after 20 years and build another one?
No, I don't. I really don't. And I think that sometimes we don't appreciate the older things. I'm afraid that too many people have the idea that it's the newer things that make the differences, but I can't feel that way. I really can't. If they're good, we should keep them.
Let's talk about some of your students over the years. I think it's always interesting to talk about people rather than to talk about buildings, and I'm sure that many students over the years have had quite an impression on you, and I'm sure that you've been pleased with the results of.
I have had so many interesting contacts because I was born in Wabash, and I've lived all my life in Wabash, and I've had the children of so many of my friends, and through some of the children have become such good friends with parents. It's very hard for me to single out people who mean the most to me because I admire them so much. One that I think of with a great deal of fondness is Rita Dingledye, who was one time Rita Fedewa. I remember Tom Wiesner is a very outstanding student, and we have kept in contact, and he hasn't come to see me recently, but he had before that. Dick Grimm, who has his doctor's degree and teaches at the University the University of California in Davis, comes to see me every time he comes to Wabash. I remember very well Nancy Cowgill, who I mentioned before, as very outstanding, very fine person. Martha Jones, who I think had her world history from another teacher, but was in high school and a very good friend, very lively, interesting person, still is, of course. All right, goodness me, I know so many of them, and I can't, it's pretty hard to.
Have any of your students gone on to be history teachers?
Yes, some of them have their doctor's degree. I remember in particular one boy by the name of Arthur Lee, who moved in here from Laketon. He's the brother of Mrs. Joe Stauffer. One time I felt that he wasn't doing very good work in history, so I sent his mother a note just telling her that he wasn't working to capacity. He was very much better than that. he went on to get his doctor's degree in the very subject that I thought he wasn't doing so well in. And he teaches. He became a teacher out in Arizona and is now working for the government.
He was just going to show you.
I should say.
How about discipline over the years, from the mid-20s to the end
Well,
of your career?
I don't know. I think maybe Mr. Carpenter would differ for my thinking in this, because as principal, he probably thought as a young teacher I was having my problems, because once or twice he came up to help me a little bit. But I've always felt that discipline should be in the hands of the teacher and not in the hands of the principal, and I almost never sent anyone from class. And I seem to hold the attention and the respect of my students, and I did until the very year, throughout my teaching career, really. But I think I quit in time. I really do. I'm afraid I might not have had it, because they have so much more leeway now.
Do you feel that discipline or respect for teachers, or what put your finger on the problem?
Oh, I think they have too much leeway. I really do, and I think there has been a tendency to allow a child to say too much, really. Now, and I don't believe in dictatorship or anything of the sort, and I think classes should be informal to a point. But I think the very first day, or at least the first week, a teacher should let the students know who really is in charge of the classroom. And I think a teacher has a right to demand respect. And I think she should have it, or he should have it. And I can't go along with the idea of some of the young teachers that they should be buddies with the kids. I think that really don't think the kids appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you some other questions before we get on to Mark Honeywell and the writing of the book. What do you remember of the Depression? You know, there's very little written about the Depression, about how the average man in the street lived during the Depression, and how did your family make out, and I'm sure that salaries were reduced and so forth.
During the Depression, believe me, I do remember it very well. I'll never forget how my brother, who had worked at Smith Hubbard's, he was my oldest brother, lost his job. First they reduced his working hours to a half day, and then finally he had to work for the WPA. It wasn't his idea, but he had to get some kind of a job. And I would take him out to a place on Far Pike to cut wood, just to get his $15 a month. I remember, too, that teachers were paid with scrip, which was simply a promise to pay when the school got some money, when the school system got money, they'd pay the teachers. And Beitman, Wolf and Company, which was then a very general store. We could buy groceries there as well as clothing. They would accept our warrants, and we could pay our taxes with our tax warrants. But a dollar meant a great deal, believe me.
Was your mother and father living during the phase?
My father died when I was only 14 years old. He had a stroke and died, and my mother lived to be 81. My father was 54, and my mother died at 81 in 1944, after we had had a very awful accident in 1940, and she remained a cripple, semi-cripple for the rest of her life.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you were the main support of the family then, really?
I was, that's right. And my mother and I were living alone during the Depression, but we helped this brother and his family as much as we could.
Would you, in looking back as a history teacher, and you saw obviously as a history teacher you'd be closer to the situation, you'd be more knowledgeable. Did you see this situation coming on or not?
I don't think that I was fully aware of actually what was going on. I remember that, I certainly do remember the period of the crash, but of course I had no money invested. I was pretty lucky to have any money in the bank, and I was in the wrong bank. There isn't a question about it. It's a strange thing that I should have talked things over with George Martin, who was my cousin, and asked him which bank. He should have gone to his bank instead of going to the Wabash County Loan Trust Company, I guess. But my little savings, $106 or something like that, I lost because I had it in the wrong bank, and they paid only 5% back.
You got about $8 back.
Yeah.
$6.
Something like that. But anyway, yes, I'll just never forget when I went down and noticed the bank is closed indefinitely, you know. Yes, I'll never forget. But I do remember what prices were. they just, well, they went down so low. I bought a twin sweater set down at, I believe it was Beitman's or Thompson's, I've forgotten. 2 sweaters for $1, good wool sweaters. Now that's the way prices were, but $1 meant as much as $20 would to me today, I suppose.
Did Roosevelt, did he capture the imagination of the man in the street or not at this
Oh,
point?
yes, very much. And I'll never forget this brother who had all kinds of bad luck anyway. I had other brothers, but it was one brother that seemed to...
He got all the bad luck.
He had more of the bad luck than anybody else. But right away, I shall never forget how, when the banks were closed, he said, well, things are going to be right now. Roosevelt was, he's going to make everything all right. I'm sure it did capture his imagination.
But you continued working right straight through the Depression and never had a layoff.
Yes, I continued to work and to get along. And luxuries, we never were accustomed to luxuries, and we didn't buy things we didn't need. So it was, not hard to get along as it would have been for some people.
In other words, if we're not attached to so many material goods, when they take them away, we really haven't lost too much.
That's just right.
How about the Ku Klux Klan? Now this is another area in Wabash County, and I've asked, I would say probably 25 or 30 people, and everyone has admitted joining the Ku Klux Klan with the exception of one man, and I assume from this conversation he really didn't know what was going on, so maybe they didn't ask him. What's your recollection of the Ku Klux Klan?
Well, I remember hearing and reading a great deal about the burning of fiery crosses. Now, I never did see any of these sheeted monsters going through the streets or anything place else, but we were constantly hearing about something that happened up on a hill somewhere, and I remember because our church was a German church, and we were closely associated with some of the German churches in the area. Well, of course, by this time we were not having German services regularly as we used to. Occasionally we'd have one. But I remember that we were told that some Ku Kluxers had marched into some of the churches and just stood around to see what was going on. Nothing really serious happened. I remember also hearing that some of them had gone into one of the churches here in town and had taken some food in instead of asking for something. And I remember, too, that one of the ministers in town actually was a worker in the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. We've gone over all the names and so forth, and his name has come up. But this is rather interesting because I'd never heard this part about them going to churches and so forth.
I can't remember that they ever came into our church, but we were always afraid that they might. And
if you were German descent, then you were suspect to the Ku Klux Klan also.
Well, apparently, they said, and I have had such a little use for the Ku Klux Klan that in classes, I really let my feelings be known, although we're not to express opinions too much, but the idea of the Ku Klux Klan has just made me furious because, they talk about the Coons, the Kikes, and the Catholics. Nearly all of my relatives are Catholics on my father's side and many on my mother's side. And I have a lot of friends who are of many nationalities, and I have a lot of Jewish friends, and the whole idea just made me furious.
What do you think killed it off? I mean, something obviously here in Wabash must have had a tremendous start and a tremendous base when these men here tell me of rallies with 300 and 400 prominent people, and I wonder what killed it off.
I don't know. I really don't.
Someone has attributed to Stevenson getting in all the trouble with
that could have been part of it.
That was the beginning.
Yes, that probably was part of it.
What was Wabash like during World War II?
Well, during World War II, it was a busy, busy place. Some of our teachers, women included, went out to work at Honeywell's and other plants to do their bit. They teach school all day and then go out to work at these factories. We saved all kinds of things. We had scrap drives, collected all kinds of metal, and went down to basements and tar out piping and everything else and took it to school and built up a heap on the south side of the lawn. And of course we sacrificed, and I was the sponsor of the Junior Red Cross for many years, and during the war years it was our organization that handled the stamp and bond drives. And every week in the activity period, which was then first thing in the morning, we would have, we'd go to the various rooms, and youngsters would buy their stamps and turn them in later for war stamps, and then we would, they could later change them for bonds, and I would make a trip down to the post office and change all these things. And we tried to get the E flag for our school, just as factories tried to get the E flag for their factories for 100% participation. We didn't always make it. 90%, I believe it was, instead of 100. But those were great days.
Someone told me that they even threw the old Civil War cannon. There was 2 of them on the lawn up there, and someone suggested they throw it in. I guess they threw it in. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. No.
How did you happen to write a book about Mark Honeywell?
After I had retired, very soon after I retired, Mr. Kent, former superintendent of schools, told me that he was very much interested in having some books written to use in social studies classes, some books that would have to do with important people around Wabash. He wanted to know if I would be interested, and I said that yes, I would. I was really very much surprised that he would ask me, but at that time I had, my oldest sister was very sick in the hospital and in the nursing home. She had a stroke. So I was too busy. I would go out twice a day to feed her later in the summer, and I just couldn't get started on this. So it really didn't get a very good start until in the fall of 1968. But Mr. Kent made it sound very interesting, and he showed me the letter he had written to Mr. Quinn, who was then the executive director of Honeywell Foundation. And together they agreed that it would be a good thing to sponsor. So I became very much interested.
When did you first meet Mark Honeywell?
I can't remember exactly. I really can't. I remember that when they used to have I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Were you on any of the boards of the community service?
Not in
Where you would have come in contact with Mr. Honeywell?
No,
Anything?
not then. And I can't remember that he was, I was always interested in Red Cross, but I don't recall that he had anything to do with that.
Did you ever get to know Mark Honeywell?
Not very well. He was always very polite. He always spoke to me, and I assumed that he knew who I was. And of course I knew who he was. Mm-hmm. But we were never on the kind of, friendly basis that would cause us to engage in conversation.
Well, what happened when you started there, when the Honeywell Foundation and the schools decided that the book was to be written, and then what happened?
First thing I did, I was just so elated because I liked to write and I'd always hoped I could. I went over to the Carnegie Library and started looking for something about Mr. Honeywell. Of course, I found something about Sanford, his father, and there wasn't a thing about Mark Honeywell. Then I got busy almost immediately, even though my sister was still in the nursing home. I got busy whenever I had a moment. I would write to some person who had worked for Mr. Honeywell or been in some way associated with him, and I had interviews here at my own home and made all the contacts I could. And I think one of the very first persons that I interviewed was Mr. Magner, and we would set up a time to meet down at the Honeywell Center, and he would give me a lot of information. But I so thoroughly enjoyed every bit of work I did for that.
How many people did you think you interviewed or corresponded with in the course of this?
Well, I suppose, now you see there were 9 men just in one group at this informal meeting where we taped their recollections of associations with Mr. Honeywell. Mm-hmm. There were so many in that, just in that one group, and I suppose altogether 25 or 30 people. I don't have a complete list of them in any one place.
Mm-hmm. What did you find when you started digging into Mr. Honeywell's life?
I found it fascinating because he had so many interesting hobbies, and I was particularly impressed with the idea that this man, who had opportunity of establishing a memorial in almost any city that he wanted to decide, wanted to come back to his own hometown. And so I'm such a loyal Wabashian that I appreciate that as much as anything else, that he wanted to come back to Wabash to do some good for the people here.
What are some of the interesting stories that you remember about Mr. Honeywell that have been told you?
Well, one of the most, I think one that has been repeated most was about his being such a perfectionist. Almost every person that I interviewed, whether they were people who had worked with him or for him or had just known him, would tell about how he insisted upon having little changes made. If a brick happened to be out of place in a fireplace or a ceiling didn't suit him exactly, he insisted that the whole thing be torn down and built over. It had to be just right, and I think that was one thing that everyone emphasized. I remember, too, the time that he drove to Michigan to make right. Let's see, there had been a terrible fire, and it had to do with one of the regulators on a furnace. It was a Honeywell regulator, and the house had burned, and the call came to Mr. Honeywell late at night, and he got in his car, and cars were open then, they had no closed sedans, and he drove alone through a snowstorm up to Michigan to set this thing right, and then he came back and worked for a couple of days working on the control so that never would happen again.
Mm-hmm. Did you get into much of his politics?
No, I didn't. There was very little said about his politics.
How about the first Mrs. Honeywell?
First Mrs. Honeywell I never knew. I just didn't know her. Of course, the Lutz family is a very familiar one around Wabash, and quite a few of my older friends do remember Olive Lutz, but I didn't know her.
Did you interview second Mrs. Honeywell?
Indeed I did. I think that Mrs. Honeywell is one of the most gracious, likable people that I've ever met. She was so willing, so obliging, and so wonderful to work with. I shall always appreciate what she did for me. I had interviews in her own home. She took me out to the lodge and told me about so many of the things that make that a beautiful place, and told me where they had come from. And she told me a great deal about Mr. Honeywell, his hobbies, the very things that interested him, like his fleet of boats down in Florida, various other things.
What would you say would have to have been the most outstanding characteristic of Mr. Honeywell?
I would say his desire to do a good thing well. That is, to do it, if a thing was worth doing, to do it well. And I think the characteristics that I emphasized here at the end of the book would indicate that. I should have had it open to this. Thoroughness in doing a job completely, not halfway, and willingness to work hard, because he did work hard. He went out among the employees in his own building. He knew them by their first names, and he worked very hard, I think, and I admire hard workers. I've always had to work hard, and I like it.
That's a German work ethic.
Yes, that's right. We always worked, and we were so thrifty. I just as Mr. Honeywell was thrifty about small things but could spend thousands of dollars for something really big and important, we certainly had to be thrifty, so I admired that in him, too. Then his devotion to causes and his high ideals of Americanism, I appreciate that very much.
Were there any other attributes that you'd want to mention? That
well, his excellence in all things. I've emphasized that before. And building for the future, not just today, his interest in young people. And I can't help but mention George Murphy, whom I mentioned in my book, the son of a very good boyhood friend of Mark Honeywell's. Lev Murphy was a barber. His son George was sent to college by Mr. Honeywell. And I had a two very interesting letters from George, giving me a great deal of information about Mr. Honeywell that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But George paid back every cent that he had ever had of Mr. Honeywell's to help himself through school, to help him through school. So that gave Mr. Honeywell confidence in young people.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Mr. Honeywell, were he alive today, what do you think he would think of the foundation today? I'm not speaking about the internal operation, I mean the facilities and the way they're being used. I've had this from other people, and I've had their impressions.
I think Mr. Honeywell would be very favorably impressed with all the cultural activities. I think he might be a little disappointed in the attempt now, or the suggestion now, that it be turned more to cultural things and not so much for the use of children. Because he, as I've mentioned in my book, wanted a place where the kids from the other side of the track, so to speak, could come to feel welcome. And he had these craft rooms, and he wanted them to enjoy the facilities. And I think maybe they're getting away from that a little.
Did you have any detractors of Mr. Honeywell when you were writing your book?
Oh, yes.
We always have detractors.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be any fun if we did.
Yeah, once or twice they say, well, I want to tell you something, but I don't want you to put this in your book, you know. And yes, there were a few. And then one of the people who really knew the most about Mr. Honeywell refused. She had an interview with me.
Uh-huh.
We had a very nice afternoon together, but she would not.
See, we were talking about we were discussing the lady that let you interview her, but then wouldn't give you any information.
Yes, and of course now people who know her very well.
Sounds like Marvel Walrod.
It is. And while she was very gracious, very nice, she was away when I first wrote to her, and I thought she just didn't want to answer me, but that wasn't true. She was visiting down in, I've forgotten, Oklahoma, maybe, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, she was away, and she didn't answer me right away. But she's very nice, and she gave me information about where I could get more information, but she wouldn't tell me anything. And Howard Worth didn't want to talk either.
Yeah.
Of course, he has since passed away, you know.
I wonder why maybe she knew more than she felt that she should do.
Well, Mrs. Honeywell explained it a little bit. She said that Marvel had taken care of all the business affairs of Mr. Honeywell, and she was always instructed not to talk, and it was a part of her policy, and I think she would have felt that she was not doing the right thing to talk too much.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to admire her for that.
I really did admire her for that, and she hasn't, I don't hold it against her really, only I do know that she could have helped me a great deal, and maybe some things, there have been more interesting things in my book. She would talk to me, but she didn't want to, and I didn't urge her.
What are all these notes? I notice here you have notes here. And
my notes, every time I am asked to talk about this book, and I am frequently, and I still have some on schedule, when I go to a classroom, and I've talked to all the fourth grades in town, I prepare one set of notes to use for children, and I prepare other notes if I'm talking to a service club. I just emphasize different things to different people. And of course, questions are always asked, and the fourth graders ask the most interesting ones.
how do kids relate to this information, really?
Well, they seem very much interested, really. They ask me the questions, of course, that surprised me, like how Mr. Honeywell caught that great big fish when I hadn't the slightest idea, and that kind of thing. But, oh yeah, they know Mrs. Honeywell. They think she's very nice and very friendly, and they know she has a beautiful home on Wabash Street, and they know what the center is like. Not very many of them, I think, have eaten in the Crystal Dining Room, but they've all been in the gymnasium. And I have tried very much, and I think this is one of the objects of having the book written, to create among the young people an appreciation for this beautiful Honeywell Memorial Center.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I worked on it about a year, very steadily. And of course, my niece Suzanne Hipskind Lee typed it for me, and we worked pretty hard during that time. And then, of course, we would have a lot to rewrite, and I would take it down to Mr. Kent, and he would look it over, and I would take it to Mr. Quinn, and he would look it over, and each person made suggestions. So it really took over a year to...
Did they make good, constructive suggestions in
Very.
your way of thinking?
Yes, in my way of thinking. I was pleased with every suggestion I got. Mr. Kent is a very good English student, and once in a while he would suggest a different structure or maybe a different word usage. And Mr. Quinn, likewise, he had written books, and he gave me some very helpful information and supplied many of the pictures and many ideas that I incorporated in my book.
Did you have a debate over the title?
No. I suggested that title, and it was accepted just right away.
Just Mark
No.
C. Honeywell.
Mark C. Honeywell. It has the subtitle, Citizen, Builder, and Philanthropist of Wabash, Indiana.
How many copies did you print? This is not polite for a person to ask an author how many copies.
Well, that's all right, because you see, the point is that money didn't just come to me. If I could have sold these 975 copies for $3.25 a piece, been nice.
Uh-huh.
But you see, they were the possession of the Honeywell Foundation, and they were not allowed to make money. But I was paid for my services, but the point was I didn't know how much to charge. Mr. Kent didn't know what to suggest. Mr. Quinn didn't offer very helpful suggestions. They had put a certain amount of money with the school system. And I was supposed simply to put in a requisition, just as a teacher in a grades or any school puts in a requisition for so many books or papers or anything of the sort. I was supposed to put in my requisition. I had to sign a regular slip, and for supplies, for the typing and everything else. And I believe that Mr. Quinn had ordered, now no one really knows because he left soon after this book was published. He was supposed to have ordered 1,025 copies, I think, but we received in the superintendent's office 975 copies. And Mr. Kent really was never informed as to why that order had been changed, but of course they determined the number largely by the number of fourth graders, and because it is to be an ongoing thing, they have enough for a supply for several years.
Are they still using the book?
They are still using the book to my knowledge. They were still using it last year.
What some of the interesting after effects of writing the book?
Well, of course, the most interesting after effects have been my association with these fourth graders. I've never taught in a grade school. All my experience has been with high school youngsters. And just getting with them and seeing their reactions and knowing that they really are interested, and now they have more interest in the Honeywell building, and I think more interest in Wabash as a result of hearing how patriotic and how loyal to Wabash Mr. Honeywell was. I think that probably has been one of the most. Another has been, of course, everyone likes applause. You know, there's a modern song entitled just that, applause. And I think the very fact that even though I had been known as a school teacher for many, many years, you know, still it was great to have this little pat on my back that I had written a book about Mr. Honeywell.
Did you get any out-of-town reaction or reviews or anything out of town?
I have had people, former students who live out of town, that have asked me to talk. And I have a former student now, Mrs. Euler from Marion, who has asked me to talk to her Marion group in February. Mm-hmm. And there have been, I have had notes of so many people who have the book, various students. The books are scattered all over the country, from California on east to the East Coast, down to Florida.
Did the Honeywell Corporation the factory make any note of the book at all, to your knowledge?
Yes, they did. One of the people who had helped me a great deal by contacting some people at the factory was Jane Shearer, and I gave her a copy just almost immediately, and others at the factory then became interested, and just rather recently I had a telephone call as to whether there would be another edition of this. They wanted to know how many were available, and I think they bought 15 of the last 45 copies that they had down at the center. And there has been a reaction, yes.
What would you say Mr. Honeywell's greatest shortcoming was? We've talked about his greatest attributes and so forth.
Impatience, probably, because he had very little patience with any person who didn't make the most of his opportunities, or any person who didn't do a good job with what he had started. I think maybe that was it.
Would there be anything else about Mr. Honeywell, like the book, or the foundation, or the factory, or your Honeywell thermostat on the wall that you would like to add to the tape?
Well, I feel very, very good about the whole thing, and I think that the book has been received very well in Wabash. I have had a great many compliments about it, no derogatory remarks, even though people may have some ideas against it, as people will always.
Right.
But I think it has been very well received, and my one disappointment has been that, contrary to what Joe Nixon wrote, and he was one of the people whom I interviewed and who was so nice about all this, he said in the foreword, that there would be other books. And the foundation hasn't gone on with that, and that's my greatest disappointment, because I would like to write more.
Write more books.
Write more books, yes. Mm-hmm.
How about your retirement now? You enjoying it?
I enjoy my retirement, I think, as few people do. It just, I have so many interesting things to do. I'm not a person to regret that I've quit teaching. I could have taught longer. I could have signed 2 more contracts, but I rather suddenly decided that I wanted to quit. And I belong to several boards in town, and I'm really quite active in a great many things, and very active in church work, and I just love life, I guess.
What is your greatest satisfaction now as you look back at 69? My
greatest satisfaction, you mean during my retirement?
No, during your life.
Oh, my life.
Your whole life.
Oh, yes. That's right, 69, and that's silly, I forgot that old. Greatest satisfaction in my life, having taught in Wabash and made such interesting associations. It's just great to walk down the street and to meet a dozen people within a block, people that I know and like so well. And some that didn't like me so very well in school have become pretty good friends, too. And then I feel, too, that I've done the best I could for my family.
Do you feel that it's been a great time in history for you to have lived during these years?
Yes, and I'm glad that I am 69 years old and can say that I remember World War I, and I remember the armistice, and I remember a great many things that some people couldn't remember.
What do you think that, what particular discovery or invention had the greatest impact on your life? Now, I've asked different people, and some have said they remember their first automobile, or they remember a first automobile, they remember the telephone, they remember the radio.
I didn't have television very early, really. I didn't get television until about 5 years ago, or whenever our telecable came to Wabash. And of course, students at the high school couldn't believe that I didn't have television. They thought I was kidding. But I had spent so much of my time grading papers, and I took my work very seriously always, and enjoyed teaching. I really did. But so many things, of course. everyone enjoys automobiles. I enjoyed having one, of course, but I'm not a person who likes to do a lot of driving out of town. I used to, but that has changed.
You mentioned buying your first car in 1930. What was the occasion?
I bought a car for $700 and some dollars. And as I recall, it seemed like a lot of money to spend. But that same car today, of course, would probably be worth $2,700. I don't know. But I just, I don't know, money seemed to mean quite a bit to me. I always managed to buy the things that I needed, and I financed that first car, I think, through the bank. At least Mr. Russell seems to think I did. He refers to it once in a while. I don't remember it very well.
Russell James?
Russell James,
Yeah.
Mr. Russell, excuse me.
Was he in the bank back in those days? Clearly? No, he couldn't have been.
Not when I had my first car. And I wonder sometimes if he isn't mistaken. I think that's when I had my gas furnace put in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what he's talking about.
He started later than that.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. He's younger than that.
What big changes have you noticed in Wabash?
Well, for one, I've noticed the changes in our transportation system. I used to like to ride on that little streetcar. We used to pay 5 cents to ride from corner of Spring Street and Manchester Avenue out to Yankee Road for 5 cents. I missed that. And I missed, the interurban that we used to use to go out of town on. When I went to Chicago, we'd take the interurban to Logansport and then take the train from there. I think one of the very nicest changes within recent years has been the change in the Carnegie Library, which, as I said not long ago, actually, after my home and my church, the library comes third. But, well, we've just made a lot of wonderful changes, I think, in Wabash.
Have you noticed the change in your church over the years?
Yes, our church has changed considerably. Of course, we used to be known as a little German church on the corner of Walnut and Huntington Street, and we seemed to be a kind of closed community somehow or other. And then later on we became the Evangelical and Reformed Church and seemed to draw in a larger circle of people. And our ministers then became more acutely interested, I think, in the affairs of the city. And then later we became, we were called the United Church of Christ. And of course, since our removal out to what we consider one of the most beautiful churches out on North Wabash Street, been very happy in our new surroundings, and church means a great deal to me.
Do you think that you've kept pace with the new ideas?
I've kept pace pretty much, I think, with the new ideas. Of course, when if people look at me and they realize that I don't really dress the way some of the women dress, and I don't patronize a beauty parlor and that sort of thing, except to have my hair cut, I may be considered a square. But I like the new ideas, a great many of them.
What do you see the outlook for this generation? For that?
Well, I think there's the tendency to be so rebellious and to show a kind of a determination to, well, what shall I say, to criticize the older people. I think that's changing, really, I do. I think they are beginning to realize the establishment has meant something to them, and I think the kids are heading in the right direction. It's taken a while for them to get adjusted, but some of the most rebellious are becoming now, I think, people of concern for their communities. I can't feel they're all bad.
What do you think over the years about the courts and the way the courts have gone?
I think they've been too lenient with juveniles. I really do. I think that perhaps there has been a tendency to overlook too many things that in the early stages could have been corrected and staved off future crime.
You've taken several vacations in the last couple of years, and where have they been to?
My vacations in the last couple of years really aren't the kind that I used to take. As people think it's strange, but since I've retired, I haven't taken any long trips. I have made 4 trips to Europe. Most of them were study tours. And I went to Alaska before it was a state, and I've been in Mexico. And I've been down through the Panama Canal. That was a very unusual experience, and that has been since I retired, down into South America, along the west coast. My more recent trips have been simply to places where the Delta Kappa Gamma Society has its international and other conventions, out Portland, Oregon, and Houston, Texas, and up to Maine and various places.
How about some of the organizations that you belong to that you're active in?
Well, I'm active in Roundtable, a literary club I enjoy very much.
How long have you been in that?
Since 1952. I'm active in the Latrine Club, which is another literary club. I'm active in Red Cross, now on the Red Cross board. I am secretary of several organizations, too many really, but I just, I enjoy doing things that I feel that I'm capable of doing, and so I seem to get jobs all along the way. Belong to the Wabash County Historical Society Board, and like that very much.
Do you go day and night, or you restrict your activity to daytime and early evening, or it doesn't make any difference?
Well, it does make a difference. I'd rather go to those things that meet in the afternoon or even in the morning, but I find myself belonging to a great many things that meet in the evening, and I haven't yet reached the place where I don't go.
Have your habits changed much from post-college years to today, really? Sleep habits, eat habits?
And not very greatly. I tell you, I've always been an early riser since I was a little girl, and the folks probably didn't want me to do it. I always got up early, and people say to me now, I suppose now since you're retired you stay in bed late. I don't. It's very rarely that I get up after 7 o'clock, and ordinarily I'm up at 6. And even earlier, if I'm awake, I like to get up, and I read a great deal. I just always have good books to read, and I'm a good patron of the library, I can tell you. I watch the library lists that are published in the paper, and just every little while I get a call from one of the librarians telling me that there's a book in for me. And I like especially historical works.
You should have been on the library board all these years.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether I have room for another board membership or not, but I certainly do enjoy my associations, and I really feel that I have a wealth of friends. I just...
You don't think that you've really changed then over the years?
Not a great deal. I really don't. I think I've become a little more broad-minded than I used to be, maybe. But I still like to work, and I do a lot of writing. I suppose that if everyone wrote as many letters as I do, the post office wouldn't be in the red.
Well, I think that's most interesting. That we live in this time, and you've lived these years, and I think they're interesting years.
We have a very large family, you see, and I am a kind of hub of the family, and I do the writing, and people ask me what I've heard from other relatives, and they have grown apart because of their various families, and I keep them together a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Is your teacher's pension and Social Security and so forth adequate?
Yes, they are adequate.
Mm-hmm.
And I get along very well financially. As I've said before, I am a thrifty person. But when I feel that I need anything, I don't hesitate for 1 minute to spend what I know I can and what I should.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this has been a most interesting interview. And would you have a thought for history then? Someone in the year 2000 will be reading this or listening to it. And would there be any thoughts or a future persons to...
Well, adopt an optimistic outlook on life. don't be thinking on the gloomy side of things and always living in the past, but profit by what you learned in the past and just keep going.
Good. Thank you. Very nice. It's been a very pleasant afternoon.
Well, thank you. This has been an interesting experience.
This is George Dingle, the interviewer.